Hey, it's Duke Doc. This is the fifth in my sort of quest to find ways to practice when you don't have anybody to practice against, and to give some foundations for newer fighters and for some experienced fighters if you've been doing this for a few years. Maybe you haven't thought about this, and maybe this is something you could pass on to people you're training. I want to talk about two separate but kind of related things today. The first is about edge alignment and control. It's in our rules, and it's an important thing. Crowns have been won and lost on it. So I see a lot of people, especially if you've got like a round stick like I use sometimes, with no definable edge in the rattan. It's only marked on the edge. But almost more importantly, if your grip isn't defined well to give you an edge feel in your hand so you can tell how it's oriented. I see guys, as they start their combinations, they're okay, but as they get faster and as they try and do these long, elaborate 5-6 blow combinations, you tend to start hitting more flat. And it's because you're trying to go fast rather than trying to be precise. Okay? So, like I see this happening a lot, where you start out here, you may go to here, but as you get going faster, it's this. I don't know if you can really tell that, but if you can't, I have devised an elaborate and ingenious invention, and I'm not going to show you how to build it. I think you can figure it out from yourself, but I'm going to use the magic of camera techniques to go from this to this. So you see what I've done here is I've taken a couple of pieces of cardboard and a little duct tape, and I have put a flag on my sword to really indicate to me where my edges and my flats are. So while I'm practicing, while I'm working on the Pell, I can really see what's going on, and it's a much more immediate visual indicator. So I start here, I can still see along the edge of that, and I can tell that I'm still oriented correctly. If I start going too fast, and I start getting here, I start seeing the face of that cardboard, and I know that's wrong. So, I mean, it looks kind of silly, right? But it's a way for you to keep yourself honest while you're doing Pell work, right? Always keeping that edge on line. It's important. Okay, so now from there, I want to talk very briefly, although this may be even a little more important because it's about our ability to not get injured and continue fighting for a long time. Wrist alignment when you're fighting is important. Now, I've always maintained that when you're fighting, your hand can be in a lot of different positions, right? It goes through lots of different transformations and stuff when you're fighting between blows. But when you strike, your hand should line up with your forearm. I don't know if I could demonstrate this as well on a camera as I could in 3D, but your hand should be as lined up as straight with your forearm as possible. Movement in this axis is okay. Movement in this axis is almost vital, necessary. When you start moving your hand in this axis is when you can start getting hurt, especially if you're impacting with your wrist bent over at 90 degrees from this straight angle lined up with your ulna here. So the reason for that is you got to realize that your wrist is not so much a joint as it is a bag of ball bearings held together by ligatures. Okay, so your muscles and this web of cartilage is what's holding your wrist together. So when you impact this, when you're at an angle like this, you put a terrible strain on those ligaments. If you do it repeatedly, well, that's repeated injury. Okay, so you want to try and keep your hand oriented as straight to your weapon as possible. If you're doing these kinds of things with your hand bent over like this, that's going to injure your wrist. Same if you're trying to reach over a shield to hit like this. Now, you can mitigate that somewhat by kind of letting go of the sword and letting it do the work. I advocate that anyway in most cases, but if you miss with a shot like this, or if it glances off and you're not holding on to it, it can flip off and go into the crowd. All right? So what do we have to do? How do we maintain our grip, maintain good wrist position, and keep our edge on line in these weird angles? Sometimes you can't. But what I mostly tell people is to look to where your elbow is. Your elbow will lead the shot, and your elbow will determine a good angle. Right? So that dropping into that slot over the front corner of a heater, say, like this. Notice that my elbow comes in, right? My elbow comes in first as my hand moves, not first, you don't want to give that tell, but as your hand moves, your elbow comes across your body so that you can maintain this straight angle and still get that slot, okay? This one's a little easier on the offside here to keep the arm straight. But you want to be careful about being in tight here and bending the wrist again to get this kind of an angle. If you have to come in tighter, there is a shot you can use that's a back edge shot in tight like that. It's this. Now I've torqued my wrist over a little bit this way, a little bit of deflection. But I'm going to hit with the back edge, and check me on my flags here if I'm hitting with the back edge. Now, that may or may not be hard enough for somebody. But really what I'm trying to get across is that this, your elbow, even an offside where you're really going in tight, the elbow rises up to lead the shot. Okay? That's plenty hard. Anybody should take that. Same with the rack. You don't want your wrist to be out of line when you're throwing a leg wrap. Don't let your wrist break that way. Keep it down here. That will also help keep your edge on line. You can check that in the video for me. Make sure I'm doing it right. I'm pretty sure I'm keeping that on. I got a little under the side that time. Now I can tell by looking at the sword as I'm doing this that I'm keeping my edge pretty much on line. And my wrist is strong because I'm keeping that in line as well. So the elbow and the forearm are kind of the rudder for the edge of your blade. And as you can see, as I bring my elbow in here, the shoulder comes down to change that angle a little bit as well. Same here. If I'm rising up, my shoulder is going to rise and the other shoulder is going to drop. It's about keeping that alignment because that is where your strength is going to come from, and it's what's going to keep you from getting injured from repeated impacts at weird angles. Okay? So try this out in a practice, or if you want to take video of yourself, it's a much easier way for you to tell whether or not, if you're not used to looking for that, this is a much better indicator that will show you clearly in video whether you're keeping your edge in line or not. So I think that's about it. Stay safe, stay healthy, keep fighting. I'm Duke Doc.